Regular meeting of the Wessel County Board of Education is called to order. Mr. Cooley will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll share an invocation with you. Anyone not wishing to participate may stay seated or stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we continue to ask for strength and guidance as we make decisions reflecting and aiding Wessel County schools. We learned recently, Father, the loss of one of our own, and so we pray special blessing on the Short Line family and the Wessel County Schools family as a whole, and all those touched by this loss. And we just pray your comforts and peace. Reminds us of the fragility of life, and just pray that you would strengthen and encourage all those who are touched. Father, be with us as we, again, try to aid our students and be with each of them and still in troubling and difficult times, but we know their education is important as they move forward in life, and so give us the wisdom necessary to make quality decisions that will aid them to have the things they need to move into their futures. We ask all this through thy Son's name. Amen. Next item on the agenda would have been delegations. I do not believe we have any listed for this evening. So the next item on the agenda is Superintendent's information.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Price. First thing I'd like to invite everybody to is the Strategic Plan Quarterly Review. That will be on October 7th at Magnolia High School at 6 o'clock in the auditorium there. And remember, our two goals for our strategic plan are family engagement and instructional leadership. And on the subject of instructional leadership, I'd like to let you know that walkthrough forms have been developed by our secondary and our elementary principals and their directors. And we are beginning the process of doing county office walkthroughs for the purpose of developing quality professional development for our faculty, not for evaluative purposes at all, just to help and to determine the best staff development for our people. So that will begin using the instruments developed by our principals and by our directors. I begin my time with walkthroughs on Wednesday. So you'll see county office staff out in the schools doing walkthroughs and to aid the teachers and aid the principals. The staff is really excited to get in the classrooms, and we're looking forward to actually seeing some good quality instruction and enjoying why we're actually here, which is for the kids. I'd like to thank you for your prayer statement about Mr. Candela. It is a great loss to our system, and did not want to let this opportunity go by without expressing our condolences and sympathies to the family and to Short Line School for their loss. It's quite a shock to all of us. You have in front of you the Wessel County Aspiring Administrator Academy informational packet, so to speak, or brochure. It's a little bit more lengthy than a brochure, not quite a packet. But everything here is what we are going to be covering in the Aspiring Administrator Academy for current Wessel County Schools educators. The objectives for this are to increase leadership capacity throughout the district by developing a cohort of school leaders who are prepared to successfully transition into the assistant principal role or principal role, to teach participants to lead diverse campuses and positively impact student growth as an administrator for Wessel County Schools, and to facilitate professional growth for participants that positively impacts current and future leadership roles within our district. We have a firm belief that we need to grow our own administrators in this county, that our people know what's best for our students and for our staff, and it's with this commitment that we will be beginning this process. As you can see, the candidates that are selected for this academy cohort will be announced after October 31st. The application window is October 1st and will remain open through October 15th. Interested applicants will apply on the Wessel County Schools website. Mrs. Simmons is creating a very brief questionnaire for people that are interested in becoming part of this cohort. We will have an informative and brief Teams interview with each candidate as well to go over the content, the curriculum, and you'll see the curriculum is included in this packet that I gave you. So if you look through any of that and have any questions throughout the next week or two, please give me a call. If you have any questions now, you can ask about that. But this is one of the teams for our teacher leadership framework that we promised we would have, and it'll be the first one that we roll out.
They get a stipend or?
Yes, they do.
Stipend,
If you look,
probably in there someplace.
if you look on the very back page, the stipend is $30 per hour for
Okay.
in-person sessions, an additional $30 per hour for up to 6 hours a month for teams learning and for action research. Yes.
And how many, will it be elementary and high school?
Elementary and secondary.
Okay, yes, and secondary, 'cause in
Yes.
high school. And how many do you have a set allotment of how many you're going to?
Do not have a set allotment at this time. Generally, getting people to go and take courses for administration. We've not had a lot of people in the past interested in that. We're hoping that this will be a good introduction, and we're hoping for a lot of people. You know, we're going to get them in. We're not going to be, we're not going to tell people, no, you cannot be in this. We are going to ask them to go through the application process so we can gauge how we can instruct and move through this curriculum, how best we can do that. We are not going to turn people away, and our hope is that once they go through this, they will want to then, Marshall University offers a cohort actually. I've been working with Dr. Eric Emsch and Mr. Cook and I have, and he has talked with Marshall University, and there's a possible cohort for administrators. And what we'd like to do is after participants have gone through this, if in fact they are interested at that point, then they can have a cohort here in Wessel County and go through a graduate program and become certified to be administrators. So, are there any other questions about that? Okay, if not, I'll have my other statements closer to the end of the agenda, and I thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda then under Superintendent's recommendations is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of September 13th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved to accept the minutes from the September 13th meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Has been moved and properly seconded. Are there any questions regarding those minutes? Not hearing any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda then is personnel matters. Are there any questions relating to the personnel matters? Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve superintendent's recommendations as outlined in the personnel matter.
I'll second it.
Has been moved and properly seconded. Again, I'll ask for questions. Not hearing any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is routine matters. Please note, board members, there was an addendum that includes a couple of extra routine matters. So A and B are on your original agenda, and C and D are on your addendum. So anyway, there are a couple of extra routine matters that we're voting on under routine matters. I do have one clarification, and I guess you'd think I've been around long enough maybe to understand all of these things sometimes, but just for clarification's sake, when we're asked, and I'm going to talk generically rather than specifically to anything, it's relevant to the agenda, but we'll talk about it generically. So are you, when we're asking for these like out-of-state trips, that the money, you're not asking us to approve any kind of budgetary changes or anything of that sort, correct? You're just asking us to approve the ability to go out of state.
That's all, yes it is. Now, in the letters that were sent, they talked about what would be paid for. Do you have those?
Yes.
Yes, and
Okay.
so I always ask people to say what will be paid through county money, what will be paid through school money, what the organization is paying for, because some organizations pay for part of it. So
Right.
I asked them to make that very specific in the letter. But we do have, money set aside for professional development and those sorts of things that have already been passed.
Right, so it falls under the discretionary spending of whether it's Mr. Houston or whether it's the principal or whoever, those line items have already been budgeted for those kinds of things. Correct? And that's all I'm trying to make sure that
Right.
we're not, when we do these kinds of things, you answer that, you approve these things. I just wanna make sure we're not approving extra money.
No.
We're just approving the right to go out of the state of West
Exactly.
Virginia, which by law we have to do.
Yes,
Um,
but I do want transparency for you guys, so
Right,
I
no,
do
I
ask
understand
for
that.
them to outline what it is that they'll be paying for and what it is the county will be paying
I
for.
understand, I understand.
Then,
Okay.
go ahead.
I also have a question under the routine matters. When we approve like all these names of people to be chaperones and
Mhm.
volunteers,
Mhm.
if I say I approve them, I don't even know 90% of the people on this list.
You're
this
right,
time.
you're right.
Does the school or the principal check them first to
The
make sure
principal,
that they're all?
yes, the principal is the one who gives this list to us.
And they've
to be placed
already
on this agenda.
checked to make sure there's not anybody in there that shouldn't be a chaperone?
That
or
is
volunteer?
their job, yes, that is their
Okay.
responsibility.
I just wanna make sure we weren't saying that if we were checking them all out,
No.
when I don't.
No, you're just going on the recommendation of the principal and myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the, out-of-state trip,
Mm-hmm.
does each principal receive money for staff to attend staff development outside the county as far as the school paying for that?
There is a certain amount of money. It's not a whole lot, but yes, there is money that's allocated to this.
Well, and that request at first said at no cost to the board, then it asked for expenses.
Right.
So it's really not at no cost to the board.
No, the cost of the summit is covered by Amazon, but
Correct.
the rest, yes.
Board members, any other questions?
I do, but I can't ask it. but-
Yeah, that's,
I
I
can't.
do understand. I'm gonna move that we go into an executive session because it deals with a specific personnel person that's being, and I had some generic questions relating to how we fund those things, but we're dealing with a specific personnel member, and there might be some questions as exactly, so I'm gonna move that we go into executive session to discuss that, so your question can be asked.
Yes.
So I move for that. Is there a second?
A second.
Has been moved to go into executive session under discussion of personnel as it relates to this out-of-state trip request. It has been moved and properly seconded.
Would that executive session be limited to that?
It is limited to only that one request.
Because there's another item here that we're gonna have to deal with in executive session too, right?
That's true, maybe two more.
Yeah, but we can't bunch them.
That's what I'm saying, it's only
Yeah,
for that
it is
one.
only
Okay,
for-
I'm just
for
making-
the- for-
I'm just making sure.
For routine matter D is the only thing we're going into
Okay.
executive session, because there may be some questions as to what relates to this particular personnel, as it relates to that
understand.
trip specifically. So I'm moving for executive session only on that item. You continue to second that, Amy?
I do.
Has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in executive session at 6:13. that, we'll let the record reflect that we are out of executive session at 6:21. We are still on routine matters on our agenda. Are there any other questions as it relates to routine matters? Not hearing any, is there a motion relating to routine matters?
Mr. President, I move that we, for approval of superintendent's recommendations as outlined under routine matters.
I'll second
It has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda, again, is on your addendum under superintendent's recommendation, a ratification of consideration of possible action on recommendation that service employees on paid contract suspension be ratified by the board. I'm going to move that we return to executive session to discuss that personnel matters.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded to go back into executive session to discuss that personnel matter. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are again in executive session at 6:22. reflect that we are out of executive session at 6:32. Mrs. Wells, are there any requests as it relates to this ratification?
Yes, sir, Mr. Price. I recommend that service employee Penny Tracy have unpaid contract suspension ratified by the board this evening.
Board members, is there a motion?
Did you say 2 days?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
I move. So
It
moved.
has been moved to ratify the suspension. Is there a second?
A second.
Has been moved and properly second to ratify the suspension. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm gonna advance that to my regular agenda now. I believe we are to the treasurer's report, is that correct? Mr. Langston, anything for us this evening?
I do have something for you, nothing that requires action. I don't have any approval for transfers or increases in the budget, but I do think now is probably the appropriate time for me to share something with you, because we need to move forward on something. This is a packet put together by McKinley and Associates, the architect that we've used many times in the past and are looking at using for the upcoming project we have going on. And before we, it requires a purchase order, it requires some things to move forward so we can get these projects going. So I wanted to talk to you about some of the changes in the numbers. What we're talking about here, it's all Payton City Elementary School. The board has already set aside $2.7 million to fix that arrangement where there is where our gymnasium and our cafeteria are sharing the same space, small space right now. So we're looking at building what we call a gymatorium there. We had a meeting on, when was that? Thursday? Last Thursday with Ms. Wells, Mr. Cook, myself, Mr. Batten, Jamie Doty, Tammy Chambers, principal of Payton City Elementary, and I don't know if I left anybody out, but McKinley and Associates, a few people from there. What we're looking at here is there's quite a few things that need to happen. Number one, separate from this gymatorium, the HVAC system needs replaced. We're really pleased with what happened and how we were able to get short lines done on very short notice. Looking back, it was whether or not we could have gotten that done this summer or wait a whole year, we were able to get that done. We don't have as much of a tight window now. We have some time, but we want to go ahead and get the bids ready for the HVAC replacement at Payton City Elementary. So there are two items on here. There is the gymatorium with an elevator. There's no elevator at Payton City Elementary. That's a project that also would include sprinkling the building. Right now, that building is not sprinkled, not required to be, because they have these escape, I don't know what you call those windows. What's
Rescue.
that? Rescue windows. But we build that addition, we're probably going to be required to do it. We're doing the HVAC system, it's a perfect opportunity to get that building sprinkled as well. So we're looking at an elevator, the gymatorium, sprinkling the building, and then a replacement of the HVAC. So the HVAC project itself, we're looking at an estimate. Again, we got to bid this out. We're not sure if it's going to come in higher or lower, but this is our best estimate. The project's going to cost roughly $3.5 million. If you remember, we decided to, with our ESSER funding, which we were going to use HVAC, use that money to do some HVAC projects in the county. After meeting with the State Department and talking about some of our options, we decided to move some of our county dollars that we're paying for salaries for regular teachers into the ESSER funds, which we're allowed to do. We did that. That freed up some county funds to do that. To be honest with you, it freed up approximately $3.9 million. So this is a $3.5 million estimated project, so it's working the way we expected it to work. We're freeing up funds to do an HVAC project. On top of that, when you look at the gymatorium, the estimate right now, the original estimate was $2.7 million. Times have changed since we got that estimate several years ago. Times have really changed, and it affects everything, including construction costs. So the estimate right now is roughly the same, $3.4 million to do that project. So it's going to require a little bit extra funds than what we talked about before. Doesn't require any action on your part. I just want to be able to move forward. Because when we get the bids and we actually do the contract bid, we will do that. I'll bring that to the board and say, here's the estimated, or here's the actual bids. We want to proceed with such and such company to do these projects. Right now, I'm just really giving you a heads up. If there are any reservations, maybe we should talk about that. But otherwise, we need to move forward. Get McKinley. They've started their drawings, or we went through their drawings the other day, and there'll be some tweaks that we might want to do, but we got to start the process so we can get this going. The HVAC, our plan is to get that done this summer. The other one will be in construction, but getting it completed in the summertime is not going to happen. But we need to move forward, get the bids done. So I just wanted to share this with you. If there are any questions you have for me, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to move forward with purchase orders tomorrow to McKinley & Associates to get it started and get everything together for a bid packet. Make sure our designs are where we want them to be. I think we're pretty pleased with what they've come up with, and we want to move forward with that. So don't really require anything. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try my best to answer.
This includes everything that could possibly be needed in the building. Like, in the past, sometimes projects have been undertaken and like there haven't been lockers in it, there haven't been some other things in it. This includes the whole ball of wax. We're not gonna be here in months to come and say, oh, now we need to add.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, this includes everything. We were under a different situation with that project, with trying to come up with funds to get that done. We tried to, I would say, value engineer another project, maybe a couple other projects before, and things happen. Can't guarantee you that there won't be any change orders on a $3.5 million project, but we have included, this is nothing that we're expecting to have to come up with later to put bleachers in later. Then no, it's all included with that. The stage, the portable stage that will go for assemblies there as well. The way we're looking at this project. So no, I think everything's pretty well covered.
This is a cash project.
Absolutely right. That's very unique, and we're able to do that with this project.
Almost unheard of.
What's that?
It's almost unheard of.
It's almost unheard of, but thank you, voters of Wessel County, and thank you, taxpayers, for the ESSER funds, because really that's what's making a lot of this possible.
Get the extra. Thank you.
Yes.
Board members, any other questions as it relates to that? Thank you, Mr. Langston, Mr. Patton, everybody that's been working on this project. I know we threw a ton of stuff at you, so I appreciate it. And we'll come to, once the bid process, then we'll actually come back for real approval once we actually get
Absolutely.
solid numbers. Gotcha. Anything else, Mr. Lancaster?
No.
No need for any action on our part today
No.
for any other transfers or anything?
No.
All right. So no action necessary on the treasurer's report. Next item on the agenda then, under item 6, is a second reading of revised Wessel County Policy JECAA. That is a deletion of that antiquated policy. Are there any questions as it relates to that on second reading? Not hearing any, is there a motion?
I move for approval of the second reading of deleted policy JECAA.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. Again, are there any questions as it relates to that policy? Not hearing any, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda are a couple of discussion and potential action requests from the superintendent.
Yes, sir. As we discussed the last board meeting, I'm very interested in posting and hiring 2 new secretarial positions. One of the Wessel County Technical Education Center, and one in the finance department here at the county office. I've asked Mrs. McPherson and Mr. Lancaster to come to this meeting with reasons that they feel this is necessary, and they've talked with me about this, and I agree with them 100%. So Mrs. McPherson, if you would start.
Absolutely. So first off, Board, thank you for your continued support of the Wessel County Technical Education Center. When the Director of Child Nutrition position was created, it was stated in the board meeting that this position was not to have a secretary or coordinator, and those duties currently being completed by the secretary coordinator would be moved to the director. At that time, child nutrition was the only title associated with that position. Superintendent at that time sat down with me. We went over the plan for the shift of duties. As the position evolved over the years, wellness and nurses were added to the position, and duties were managed well. The coordinator of transportation maintenance facilities child nutrition did keep some additional child nutrition duties, such as purchase orders, maintaining and filing of yearly information, submitting monthly claims. And however, once I was moved to the director principal at the Wessel County Technical Education Center, many additional duties fell on my shoulders, causing difficulties in properly completing existing duties that were shifted to me when the position was created. Simply shifting these duties back to the coordinator, while sounding good in theory, is not possible due to the increased workload on that position. The coordinator position that is shared also has experienced a significant increase in purchasing, beginning the same time the child nutrition director position was created. This is the same issue that's occurring in accounts payable. Other changes in policy has also caused increase in the workload of that coordinator position in other areas, such as transportation. Then we have COVID, and we have and still have mandates with next to impossible expectations that somehow we managed to complete. If you look at the child nutrition program alone, the procedures to collect data for meals served completely changed, and the time necessary to complete the monthly claim has increased dramatically. By adding a building secretary, duties associated with Wessel Tech can then be shifted to this position, freeing time for the coordinator to take back certain appropriate child nutrition duties to ease the burden. Additional appropriate child nutrition duties could be given to the building secretary as well. The question came up at the last meeting, how are these duties being completed now? My answer, not well. If we're happy with mediocrity, doing just enough to get by, I can tell you that personally I'm struggling to achieve that with the current expectations of this position. If we hold high expectations for our students, our staff, and our administrators, we must support those in these positions. Thank you.
Mr. Langston.
That was you. This is a simple graph. And I think it really, I'm prepared to discuss anything you want about this position, but the situation is, what you're looking at is the annual budget for Wessel County Schools. You're looking at what's happened in the past 10 years. And you're looking at our budget going from approximately $36 million to approaching $75 million. That is our annual budget. How have we been getting it done? We've been getting it done. I always compare the finance staff to a duck on a pond. That you see the duck and everything looks wonderful, but here's what we're doing underwater all the time, all the time. And you know, this extra position, I want to say, isn't really helping me. It's helping our AP coordinator upstairs, because she's struggling to get everything done. She's getting it done, but you can talk to teachers. It's taken a while to get requisitions sometimes. It's taken a while to get orders sometimes. And it's because we have to prioritize all the time. You know what? The lights are always on, because that's our first priority. How do we go from this kind of a budget to doubling the budget with really the increase in staff was, we did hire an accountant upstairs, but really that's a half-time position. And my workload has increased dramatically too. I don't want to talk about that, but what's happened with our requisitions, with our orders, it is really practically doubled. And we've been doing it with the staff that we have. When we can talk about ESSER, when the ESSER funds came in, it was recommended in the ESSER funds that, hey, we can use that money for positions for finance, because it's happening. It's happening in payroll. We're paying a whole lot more stipends now. It's happening in, definitely happening with our purchases through these funds. So this speaks louder than anything I can say if you just look at this budget and what we're doing with really the small staff that we have for finance. It really, one other thing I want to say, we've had a pretty good situation in, we weren't really getting it done with our small staff. I'm just going to be honest with you. We were getting it done with our small staff and the addition of a substitute secretary. That substitute secretary is outstanding. Used to work for me. We have that luxury, and hopefully we still do in the future, but it's going to start limiting, and it already is. When we were getting way behind, I could call that subsecretary. We could have her come in and help us out. Things are changing in her life that's making it harder for her to do that. So, to be honest with you, I need something. I have to have something. If I can't have that option, which has been a great option, I speak the world over, but if I can't have that option, there's just no doubt about it. I've got to have some help. And it's this graph. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Lancaster. Thank you, Mrs. McPherson. Any questions from the board?
Well, and I guess, I know both of you, for years, and I can appreciate workloads and the challenges, and the truth is, there's probably all kinds of people that could use help, here and there. And I am trying with all in me right now to find the easiest way to say what I'm about to say without sounding like an authoritarian jerk. But with what I asked for was a posting. What was this job going to look like? And
I'm going to hand that out to you right now.
Okay, there you go. That'll help me. Because that's what I asked for 2 weeks ago, and I'm trying to say that politely. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be a pain about that. But what I was looking for was what is this position going to look like when it gets posted, and that would help me be able to go, okay, now I understand what that job would look like. Board members, any other questions?
I would have liked to have had this ahead of time, and I'd like to have had your report.
This
Receive some information ahead of time. I can't discuss things because it would identify an pool. I don't know if you were aware of that. President, I move that we go into executive session to discuss.
It's been moved and requested that we go into executive session and seconded to discuss the personnel that serve in secretarial roles in these positions. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll go back into executive session at 6:51. Record show that we are out of executive session at 7:06. Board members, now we've passed those specific personnel questions that you had as it relates to this matter. Are there other questions that relate to the hiring of these two new secretarial positions?
Mr. Lancaster, you mentioned that we use the federal funding that we're receiving to fund this position that you're asking for. What about when that funding is no longer, we're out of that fund?
To be clear, that's not really what I was asking, but I'm saying that that was just a justification of a suggestion on how to use some of that funds that was put out with the guidance for it when the ESSER came out, because of all the added work. I'm not looking for something just to cover us for 2 years, because that's not gonna solve anything. Until our budget starts declining again, it's not gonna solve anything. So I'm really not asking for it to be federal money, although it could be. I mean, there's indirect costs that you can charge these grants that will bring in another $1 million. I mean, the funding source, as far as in the scheme of things, the funding source for a secretary position is not going to break the bank. I mean, you add them all up, it will, but I'll argue for the importance of my position over just about any position out there, because it has to be done. I don't know what I'll do without one, to be honest with you, if I don't have a other than train another subsecretary, which is what I'll have to do.
You understand as a board that this spring, if we're asked to cut positions out in the schools, this comes right back to us that we added these positions.
Yes.
You understand that?
Yes, sir.
We hear that after time. Mr. Cashman, I'm gonna ask you a question unless you.
Go ahead, you're welcome to, you got the floor.
Is it possible to have a half-time position for you and a half-time position out at the set?
I'm gonna let you answer first.
Well, I was going to say, so one position split. in
If you
half.
were to share a position.
Share
Yes.
a position. I think there need to be some coordination. There's certain times that certain things need to be completed. At my location.
My position is a lot more flexible. We've got expense reports that need to go out. That person could be in charge of expense reports, and this is an example, however I'd structure this. They could be in charge of utilities, they could do that in the morning, they could do that in the afternoon. I could work something out with that. Will that be enough help? It's really hard to predict, but if it's not, I mean, it's not like I'm milking anybody here. I'm just trying to get the work done upstairs. So I'd be willing to entertain that, at least, right, if the alternative is zero.
When the substitute secretary worked, did she work full days or did she work half days?
Full days. But she didn't work 200 days a year. And ideally, she's still gonna work some, but it all depends on her circumstances.
And I was gonna ask that you still have, if you have really with a half-time person, and you still would have the option of bringing a substitute in.
Yeah.
If you had a tremendous amount of billing to do.
Yes. It's just such a unique position that your normal subsecretaries cannot do what they need to do. The person that we have was the accounts payable coordinator
Very
in that
special.
position. Yes.
And whoever gets this position, if the board approves this, is gonna have to be trained.
Yes. And if you're talking about, well, I don't know.
Board, any other questions as it relates?
So with what you're saying, it would just be one person hired and they're split, not two half-time people.
So one full-time position
Yes.
posted as
Okay, so it wouldn't be
in a
two,
way
like a
that
half-time
would
position
allow those.
posted for him and a half-time position posted for her.
And it wouldn't necessarily be half-time morning here, afternoon there. It could be 2 days out there at the tech center and 3 days in here,
Vice versa.
or vice versa. It's like,
let's hear your feelings.
Splitting it up days like that would be difficult based on the nature of a school secretary position. That's why I'm thinking there would be some way to.
Yeah, I would
but-
presume to tell you all how to use this position. I'm just saying, the real question just really is, could we try one between the two of you, and you guys work out how that works? You know what I mean? I'm not gonna sit here and dictate and say, well, we're gonna, you get them for 2 days, you only get them for 3 or whatever, you get it. That's your, yes, you know, I wouldn't dictate that. The real question at the core is, could you think we can try one position and see if that fills the void between?
My doctor said half is better than none.
The only thing that I can say is I'd like to think we can make that work. I really would. That's going to have to be structured. We can't get into this. We've shared secretaries before, and everybody's nice. But when everybody's nice, somebody gets, and I'm a nice guy, and so we can't be nice. We've got to say this is the structured time, and we'd have to work it out that way. And then I'm just saying, I know there are certain times. April 15th is our requisition deadline. You can't get it done without additional help above a halftime secretary, I promise you that. So there'll be times where I need that, I still have that option to bring in a sub to help us get organized, but I'd be willing to entertain it.
And from the perspective of a school secretary, April 15th, just using that date, is a really tough time in the tech world and CTE world, because we're giving end of course assessments, we're doing portfolio development, we're governor's workforce, all those things are coming down, so there's lots of stuff going on, lots of people in and out of your buildings at that time, and you definitely need a secretary during that time as well, so it's just something to think about. Plus the paperwork that goes along with that, and the record keeping and the WEBIS updating.
You're probably looking at 2 different pay scales. I'm not sure how yours would be structured, but ours would have to be, well, we'd have to look into that, but I would assume, a school secretary does not make the same pay as an accounts payable. Accounts payable makes a higher rate by state code. So if that's a school secretary position, we'd have 2 different rates, which you could work out. But, and I could not go with the school secretary. I would have to have somebody that passed the accountant test, which is to do what we do there.
Well, I mean, we've talked for years about how you just feel like this day of reckoning's out there somewhere.
Oh, it's out.
That's coming when the funding, but that isn't today. I also recognize that's not today, and and sometimes I feel like, am I responsible for kicking a can down for somebody else in the future to have to deal with?
There are things that I'm hesitant to say, because I know how it appears when I say things like this, but it's always been a problem of mine. I can't keep my mouth shut sometimes. You just look at our P card alone, and what we've done in my department as far as the P card goes, and our rebate that we receive, that is going right back into the school system. That didn't exist before I started running that P card program. I have to fund a position, a halftime position. I mean, there are plenty of things. I brought in FEMA dollars. We're expecting $831,000. I'm still working with the flood from 2017. That's funds that, yes, I'm doing my job, but some of that wouldn't be received if I hadn't done that. So it's hard for me, and I do get irritated when I know what money I'm responsible for bringing into this county to have to argue for help that isn't extra. I mean, it's help to get the job done. It's frustrating on my part, to be honest with you.
And we can't take anything away from what you do, because you have to do all of it.
Yes.
I understand that. My concern still is the vast number of people were over the state formula, and we say at meeting after meeting after meeting that we're going to cut back and that we're going to slow down, and meeting after meeting after meeting we keep adding. And I just wonder if there's some way, and I mentioned it, to restructure so that, you know, we have a lot of people out of the center. There's some way to restructure some of it so that you don't have so much. That's just my thoughts.
Board members, any other statements, comments, questions?
When it comes to Mrs. McPherson's request, I just keep thinking if it was one of the, I hate to use the term real, but one of the 8 real schools, we would never say no. And our hope and desire is that we continue to grow the tech center. And then, Mr. Lancaster, the fear that I have is if we were to hire someone for your department, and then all of a sudden the budget go down, and then that position's not necessarily needed. And so we talked about doing, I don't remember the term.
Tire.
What is it?
Tire.
Tire?
Yeah, temporary lieutenant, regular employee.
Okay, we talked about doing that. I would definitely be a whole lot more comfortable doing that, you know, for a year or so, just to get a feel for how it all works out. But I see how, I truly see how both positions are needed. And I also understand that it's our position to keep an eye on those numbers and those things. But at the same time, we have made the conscious decision to have 9 schools. It's gonna happen. I actually think that my viewpoint's different from everyone else, but somewhat going along with this, and I'm not asking for this at the next meeting, so whenever you can compile this, I would be curious to see where our numbers are. Not just however many it is over in service personnel, but to see it broken down. Are we heavy on secretaries and, yes, that's, you know what, doesn't,
You're wanting to know
My
the
classification. Yes, I'm trying so hard to get the words out of my head. I'm seeing everything flash, you know. The guidance counselors, over the time that I've been on this board, we've added, social workers, all of this. Where are we in all of that?
Meaning where are we, just the state?
Numbers.
The state, oh, okay, just the state of the
Where,
county.
right.
Okay.
Can we see the breakdown and where everything is? And see if there's some place where we need to concentrate on redeveloping that area and allow for retirements and those things to be absorbed. I think it would help, at least for me, just to see that breakdown.
So you would like pretty much a report on all the employees and their classifications / positions in the county.
Right, I don't need names or anything like
Right.
that, I'm just
Right,
looking
numbers.
for where our numbers are.
Right.
As treasurer, I share your concern of people over the formula, but I also would like to say that don't lose sight of the fact that these past 2 years are the biggest surpluses this county has ever seen, by far. And so we have chosen to invest in people. Otherwise, you've got to spend your money somewhere. We're not in the business to make profit and give it out to, you know, and there's plenty of things we need. Don't get me wrong. There are needs in our county school system, but it's a tough situation for it. I do understand.
Our October report, is that the second month report that lists all the attendance and the numbers and all?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that will be helpful to us too, along with the list that she said, just so we can see, because, you know, you have I'm going back to the classroom level, of course, that's my background. But you see a class of 23 students in one place and 11 students in another that are both regular ed, and it still makes me question. We've had problems with it before, and I still question that. So I think having that information from that and seeing the attendance report at the end of the second month would be very helpful.
That can be done.
I always find myself on this side of the table struggling with what would I do? But in some ways it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? In some ways it's irrelevant, what would I do, because I'm not in charge of figuring out the schools, you know, there's a weird balance of trying to let you all do what you do and take care of our school system, and you know what your needs are, and I'm not here every day. I don't sit in your office every day and watch your people work, and I'm not out there every day watching what's going on, so I have to kind of trust, you know what I mean, there's a level of trust that when you see your needs, you know what they are. And that's where I always find difficulty in that, and trying to balance where my decision making lies and rests, and allowing for you all to kind of see in the everyday world what your needs are.
So what we're looking at is, are we going to approve 2 full-time separate ones, one that's shared between the 2, or vote on each one separately? Is that correct? No? Are those the options? I mean, I just.
Well, you could, I mean, any motion can be made as it relates to that, certainly, if you wanted to do it any of those ways, I suppose, from a motion standpoint.
I would think
Feel
that
free to do that.
we would be waiting on the material that Mrs. Cooley asked for, the breakdown and everything before making that decision. Is that correct, or am I way off?
That's totally up to the board. If you if that's where you know what I mean, it's your choice to make. I mean, if somebody makes a motion as it relates to this, then if it gets seconded, we vote. If it doesn't get seconded, we don't vote. If it gets voted no, it doesn't happen. I mean, that, you know what I mean, you can.
So we're saying we're gonna post a half-time position here and a half-time position
That's what I was
around the
wondering.
center? Cause that could be two different people when, I tell you,
It's way hard to get.
we pay the same benefits. A half-time person gets the same benefits as a full-time person. I would think we're talking about one person for both districts.
When I asked for that material, I did not ask for it with the intention of putting anything off.
But did you ask for it to apply to this situation?
No, it's something that I just have been thinking about and would like to see.
Okay.
Well, I guess what we're at then, if somebody wants to make a motion one way or the other to hire
Or the table?
one, you could make a motion to table, you could make it, you know, again, that's, every board member's free to make any kind of motion you choose as it relates to this.
I move to table the hiring and posting.
Has been moved to table, is there a second to that? Not hearing, oh,
I have a question.
okay, there is a question on the table.
If it was tabled, could we come, Mrs. Wells, could we come to the next meeting after you discussed this out and looked at it to see if it would work? Or do we need the help right away?
We need help right away. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I am wrong?
No.
Okay.
Isn't tonight the third time, or the second time, the third time on the agenda? Is it the second?
I gave you warning, then I
Okay.
presented last week.
Okay, thank you.
There is a motion on the floor, and there was a question as it relates to it, but is there a second to that motion? I'm not hearing a second, so it cannot move forward for a vote on tabling the issue. Are there any other motions as it relates to the matter?
Mr. President, I move that we instruct the superintendent to post one position to be shared by the finance department, the county office, and by the Technology Center.
It has been moved to request that we reduce this to one position. Is there a second to that motion? I would second that motion. All in favor? Are there any questions about that?
If one position's gonna be posted, what are the how are you gonna post it? Is it gonna be, like Mr. Lancaster and Mr. McPherson both said, they're different positions, right? I mean, they're different, what's the word I'm looking for?
Classifications.
Classifications. There's kind of the difficulty, because this alludes to like accountant 3, coordinator of accounts payable, and the tech center would be school secretary. Correct? Is that
Can
basically?
you have mixed classifications and have it worked out?
I have never seen that done. I'm not gonna say we can't, but I have never seen that done. Mr. Yeager, Mr. Cook,
I
you ever
have
seen
not.
that done?
You could have custodian.
Okay, okay.
In other words, there's two different classifications being rolled into one job. He's just giving you an example.
But is there pay?
Pay for this accounting, the finance position, accounts payable is gonna be more, because the classification's different, higher than a school secretary.
And I think it's opening a can of worms in the sense of, 2 hours here and 6 hours there, and I think it's opening a can of worms.
But if they try it, if we try it, and that way not hire 2 people, saving on one position, and we see that it's not working, and that you definitely need more, it can always be brought back, correct?
Correct.
It's not as easy as you think. I think you have to rip the position and repost. That'd be my guess. I don't know how that works, but, unless you hire the same exact position twice, which is not the way you want it.
Probably move lateral into one or the other, because, well, I can give you a case and example was, my wife was half-time at Payton City Elementary, half-time at Payton City High School, and when she got the band director job, she just switched, she was half-time elementary, and she just laterally moved, because the job included work in both buildings.
However, with those 2 classifications, if that were to be changed, that would be a issue then, making it a full-time one or the other. Am I thinking along the right lines?
Well, I think the person would just move in whichever direction of the job they wanted, in that sense, you know what I mean, they're doing half, and so if we said we're gonna make each one full-time, that person would probably be able to move into whichever direction they would wanna go.
What if somebody else had more seniority and wanted that position?
That's where my mind's going.
Yeah, you'd have to post it.
Yeah, you could have, the position out at the center would probably be I believe it's a C. Then after 2 years, you become a D, or is it more you can have?
Secretaries are 10 years.
Oh. They start out as a B. While a accounts payable is a D or an E.
Coordinators are H's.
They're H,
H.
if they're made a coordinator.
Yep.
Then we've said maybe there'd be itinerant. I don't even, Mr. Cook, what's the language for that to be itinerant?
I'm gonna have to reach out to.
There's even, is there itinerant service personnel?
Is the reason for itinerant
I
case the
think the
funds
only
go
place
down?
you can do that's with,
Consumer
CAD, aids, yeah.
Recently, it's 3 or 4 years ago, there was a secretary that worked half-time here and half-time in New Martinsville Schools, so this isn't unprecedented. I
That's
don't
true.
think.
That's
Good
true.
point.
Yes. she received for half her pay the higher scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been done before,
It has.
yay.
Was that two separate positions that you bid on, or was
Yes.
that?
Nope, it was one position.
Okay.
It was one position, yes.
I realize it monkeys it up and challenges it.
Settled that, huh? Yeah, it's gonna take some research here to figure out how to do this proper legal way.
Well, it has been moved and seconded, and and I guess I'll just make this statement, it relates, if this would be approved in a moment, then if you come back to us and say, can't be done, then we can rescind the motion, we can rescind, you know what I mean, we can rescind our decision. I realize that creates a time issue, which is one of the things we're trying to avoid here maybe, but we can always rescind the decision if we find out that we can't legally post that kind of job. Just a thought.
The motion then was,
So the motion is to create one position, and let them figure out the posting as it relates, to how they wanna word the posting, because it will deal with certain accounting issues, on top of school secretarial issues. And that was moved by Mr. Yeager. I seconded so we can move it on to a vote. Are there any other questions as it relates to hiring just one position? All in favor of hiring just one position, say aye.
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 And I am aye as well. And so the motion carries. Are there any nays?
Nay.
Sorry. There's
Nay.
one nay. Here's your ayes, so I just wanted to do that.
I was waiting.
So, so the motion carries it to go ahead and post one position, at this time. Next item on the agenda then is the, discussion of the universal mask requirement. Oh, what a switch of gears, but.
Okay, board, because universal mask requirements regardless of the DHHR map color allow a county to relax the contact tracing and quarantines while still preventing a great deal of transmission, I am making the call to go to required wearing of masks regardless of the color of the map tonight. Contact tracing will need to occur only when an exposure is in a high-risk unmasked area such as the cafeteria or in extracurricular situations where masks are not worn. This should greatly reduce the number of quarantines. WVU Wessel County Hospital has urged the practice of masking beyond the red as well and has reached out and contacted me and spoke with me about this. The following is from page 9 of the most recent school guidance. Contact tracing for schools with universal mask policy. For schools with a universal mask policy, regardless of DHHR map color, quarantining students and staff who have been exposed to a person with COVID-19 is not required if masks are worn at the point of exposure, including extracurricular activities. Schools should try to limit potential exposures while students are eating lunch by cohorting students who eat together or by eating in classrooms. This will reduce the risk of exposure to COVID-19. Board, please remember that this guidance that was received September 3rd of this year changed after we had made the initial decision to mask while red. Had this guidance that we have now been in effect at the time I let you guys know of masking in red, I would have most certainly required universal masking. To me, this is a no-brainer. Our staff is exhausted. To not require masks and make them unnecessarily contact trace at this point would be absurd in my opinion.
I'm fine. And board members, any questions about that? And we appreciate your leadership in taking on, and you're the ones that are talking to the nurses and the health departments and the hospitals and all those things. It would kind of be out of place for us to start jumping in on that when you're the one in contact with us. And so we appreciate that. And I'm with you. Again, we've said this before, but I'm not asking people to believe in it.
No.
I'm not asking people to argue one study over another study and those, all I see is very simply that if we have this in place, we'll keep healthy kids in the classroom.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line.
And we'll keep our schools open.
And we'll
Yes.
keep healthy kids in the classroom.
Yes.
And that we're going home before. We've all said that the key to getting back on track is to get kids in the buildings and get them in the classrooms.
Yes.
And this will allow us to do a better job of that.
Exactly.
And so if that's, and by the way, just to be sure that everybody understands, this is West Virginia, and I got a copy of it with me, by the way, just in case. But it is West Virginia Bureau for Public Health legislative rule. There's no, that aspect, we don't have any leniency on. If we don't do universal masking, then all this contact tracing
Right.
business has to happen, because this is a legislative rule, from the Health Bureau. And so I just want to make sure that's publicly clear, that this, the only option we have is to whether we do masks or not. But we don't have any options once we make that decision as it relates to what we do in relationship to COVID then. But the universal mask policy gives us a whole heap of better chance of keeping more of our students in the classroom.
And that's what we're about.
And that's what we're about.
Yes.
Do we have to make a motion or anything that
No,
we?
there is no official, there's no, we're letting Mrs. Wells and her staff, because they're the ones talking to the health people, to continue to make those decisions. And it's within the state law and state code for her to be doing that, and so, no actions necessary. Any other questions about either of those matters? On the board member committee reports, which is the next agenda item, I will just mention a quick email from Mr. Barkus, or a text message, I think it was earlier today. I think I assumed that was you, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't have your name in my phone, the laws are still working. I think maybe next week she plans to start diving into the fiscal side of our policy manual, and just to
Correct.
remind everybody that we're trying to get that policy manual up to date. And so we're still not ready to have any meetings or anything yet, but it looks like maybe next week they'll start looking at it again.
Correct, and she wanted to let everybody know that this one will be very lengthy, so it's gonna take some time.
Do we, being a part of this, do we pay her, or do we pay, she's part of Dinsmore, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do we pay Dinsmore, do we pay her, do we pay her monthly, do we pay her by policy, what's the procedure on payment?
It's just part of their bill for any legal services that they get.
Okay.
It goes to Dinsmore.
Okay, thank you.
Any other committee reports?
One thing, this kind of goes with Mr. Cassidy, Lofty. I'd ask about numbers that are attending down there in our schools, per school, what programs, and so forth. We can maybe have that for next week.
Yes. I should have had that for you this meeting, and I apologize for that. I will have it for you next meeting.
It's in the buildings.
I'm sorry?
I brought that.
Yeah, you did.
It's in the building, but you have lots of other stuff.
That's okay, I should have done it, so, yeah, I'll get that to you.
No other committee reports then. Other items, discussion of accountability and school performance.
Okay, I'll start with my assistant. Mr. Cook, anything you'd like to add?
You want me to go? Yeah, she's going to follow through with this. In personnel, we do get requests pretty much weekly, just this time of year, of also different situations we have in the buildings. And one in particular, New Martinsville School, they're in need of an aide, and I want them to discuss more so what their needs are to you guys, so you'll know, have a better idea of what, we're dealing with here, so.
Okay. It's for pre-K, and really this is, and I thought about it because I don't ask for much, and I know we're over the formula, but right now we have 67 kids in pre-K up there. We have 19 of those kids are special education. Over half of those kids are 3-year-olds. We have 2 rooms up there that really could have an aide in both rooms, another aide in both rooms, because of the kids that are in those rooms. But really what I'm asking for is a roaming aide that can go back and forth to help with these 3-year-olds that's in these classes. They're very, very, very needy. And I was up there to do an observation myself, to be sure. I don't see any way for it to be even a safe condition unless we can put some more help in there.
Is that a common practice? To
We
have-
had roaming aid before, yes.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Yes. I know a lot of times you put an extra aid in the rooms for them. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for an aid for them to share. But we're trying to get all the 3-year-olds to school full days too. And that's gonna make a huge difference when we do that. That's gonna be huge, cause you're talking babies. So, that's what I'm asking for. Bad timing, but
That's a new requirement. That means what, 6 hours a day?
they're,
It's not really,
it's not a,
it's not a new requirement.
and it,
Our 3-year-olds didn't, in the past, have not went that long.
They have not gone the full day. They have gone on an alternating half-day schedule.
So this is a new practice then?
well, we're not there full-time with all of them yet.
Okay.
Okay, so, and that may make a difference when we're there full-time with all of them. I mean, there's a huge difference, 2 or 3-year-olds in a classroom.
Right now, we have to write, transition plans for the students that are 3 that are not
That,
attending
that's not
full-time.
full-time.
So we have to, teachers have to write transition plans to, increase their time until they reach a full day. That's where we are right now.
So you would consider, consider this to be an imperative, right?
Yes.
Does that require board action? No?
Well, it's just approval opposed, just like we were doing before.
We're using substitute right now.
Yes.
Board members, any questions?
Does it require a motion?
We can, just to give them clarity if you want.
I so move to have a roaming aid, New Martinsville School, correct?
I'll second that.
Has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, you're right. It's been a long night. Are there any other questions though? We've been moved and properly
And
seconded.
I know that this is needed, I know it's needed, but it seems like these positions never, ever go away. Once you create them, they never go away.
Well, I tend to agree with what you're saying. I know what you're saying. But I don't know what else to do here. I mean, really, you could say we need another teacher and aide just to make the room smaller so you can handle the kids. You know, I'm trying to ask for the least amount that I can ask for and get by with. But I like I said, I did the observation.
I'm not questioning the need.
Right.
I'm not questioning the
Oh, I
need.
know.
Any other questions or comments?
I just
about the
feel like
motion?
we're here, that's our main thing, we've gotta keep going back, is for the students. That's what we always need to go back to, and so I just think that's what that would be for.
Any other questions or comments? That has been moved and properly seconded then to approve this posting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
That's all I have. I'm not asking for anything else.
Thank you.
Mr. Lancaster, you're good?
I have nothing.
Okay, Mr. Vargas?
Yes, a few things, just wanna share real quick. First, for our school counselors and our school social workers, they'll be having a vaping prevention training. It will be held in early November, be presented by Willing Youth Services. Also, for the last several weeks, we've been discussing with the principals, concerning possibly purchasing vape detectors for our schools. I've been working with Willing Youth Services on that as well, as they have some funding that they may be able to help us with to offset some of that cost. Second, I attended a signature series training that was presented by Bowles Rice Law Firm last week. The topic was student discipline and all the laws and policies that go with that. I'll discuss that in much more detail next week with our principals at the principals meeting, but just want to let you know that glad to hear that from listening to the training, Wessel County Schools is using alternative education, what it's intended for, and it's not a catch-all or a clear-the-hall type program. We were told to always keep in mind the purpose of alternative education, and to remember, of course, that every expulsion or change of placement involves a child, not an adult. And the last thing I wanted to go over with, kind of piggybacking off what Mrs. Wells was saying with the universal mask debate. I've had a lot of, this is about school attendance during the pandemic. So it continues to be a catch-22. I've had a lot of conversations with parents since August 23rd who are just confused on when to send their child to school and when not. And a lot of them are being overly cautious in keeping their children home when they don't have to be quarantined. They're kind of self-quarantining them, and they'll give a reason that their other sibling was quarantined, not tested positive, quarantined, or they'll have a chain from this kid to that kid to this kid, whatever. What I keep stressing to them is, here are the guidelines that we're given from the State Department, coming from the CDC. Of course, if your child is sick, we do not want your child in school, and if your child is quarantined, of course, they cannot be in school. But if it's not one of those two situations, we keep asking them to send your children to school. When they keep them out 2 or 3 days at a time to test them and then bring them back, of course, that just keeps on adding to the absences. What we have seen so far this school year in all of our schools, not just the 3 largest that are going to stand out the most in Martinsville School, Magnolia, and Shortline, but at all of our schools, when the number of positive cases increase, the number of quarantines increase, and the total absences are also increasing, and not just everything related to COVID. So, you'll have the absences that are due to those, you'll have the other absences that are due to all the several other reasons they can be absent, and that sort of thing. So we're seeing that across the county. I was asked this morning, are we seeing that also, if it happens at a grade school, are we seeing that in the high school in the same attendance area? And the answer is yes. So if one school has a lot of quarantines, you'll see the feeder school have a lot of total absences as well. So as I discussed at a board meeting earlier this summer, it's going to continue to be a challenge during this pandemic. If you remember, the State Department has already told us there's not going to be any kind of waiver for attendance accountability because they can't get a waiver from the feds. So long story short on all that is, if the child's not sick, if the child's not quarantined, we want them to be in school. We know in-person learning is best. We want to keep our schools open for academics and social emotional reasons, so we just continue to try and get through this best we can. That's all I have, Ms. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Mrs. Stanford, you already went?
I already
That's
went.
all you have? Okay, Mr. Batten?
Just 2 major projects we're still working on. Valley Greenhouse is still working there. And as far as the IP security camera systems, I think we have 2 schools, I think, Mr.
I believe we have 4.
Made
Quickly
4
running.
up and running.
Yes.
And have heard nothing but positive reviews from the new sets of cameras and so forth. So they continue just to work around the county. So.
I'd like to
Right.
thank you, Mr. Batten, publicly for the extra work that you've had to put in morning, noon, and night in getting bus schedules changed and finding drivers with the low number of substitutes that we have, and still we're able to get kids to school. So I want to thank you for that, because I know last night was rough.
Good. Thank you, Mrs. Wells. Appreciate it.
Mr. Houston?
Let's see, met with high school principals last week. We finalized the secondary walkthrough that we should be able to get in place sometime this week. Mr. McPherson's working on the back end kind of stuff. We also discussed, we will have, what is it, it's escaping me, a test.
What is it?
Semester exams. We will have semester exams. There's a discussion on whether or not to have them. We're going to actually kind of do something a little different this year. We're going to give them in December. Everyone's going to take them. It's just going to be a period long. And what's going to be different about this is we're going to allow the kids to have a retake if they want to at the end of January. So they would take that first round. The teachers would do a reteach, give them input on what they need to work on, and give them another opportunity to master those standards. So we're doing that. Also today I was on a Zoom conference with Education Alliance, about middle school career explorations guide. I told Mr. Barkus that we're gonna have the middle school counselors talk with each other to provide some input, but EQT is gonna pick up the vast majority of the cost, which is really nice. They said it was probably gonna cost about $15,000-$20,000, and I think our worst we'll have to come up with is $5,000, which I'd already budgeted through a secondary block grant for middle schools, which is really nice. So, and what would be different, we're going to try to gear so 6th grade has a set that goes along, pertains to them. 7th will have something that pertains directly to them, and then 8th grade will have something pertains directly to them. So that's what's going on.
That's huge. That's going to help us meet that requirement for 6th through 8th career exploration. So it's perfect. So thank you for that. And kind of pioneering something for the whole state. Nice. Thank you, Mrs. McPherson.
Mr. Houston, you said all students, all high school students will take exams.
Yes.
Mr. Houston, I want to commend you and the high school principals for that decision.
Well, at least for
And
the
I
first.
like the retake, and I like the retake part of it too.
Well, it goes along with being able to master the standards, you know, and
Yes.
actually that is a high yield strategy when you give an exam, that you go over the exam and give the kids an opportunity to fix their mistakes. So we're gonna try it and,
Good.
try to we're done.
Expectations. So, Mrs. McPherson.
Child nutrition hat for a moment. It was brought up in a meeting a while ago about the food shortage. It has definitely hit, and it's hit hard. So we just ask everyone to be patient with us as we make adjustments and get what we can when we can. Just keep working forward on that. And we spoke about the mask mandate, so I think that has everything covered. Just the big thing to remember is that there is still contact tracing in the situations in those high-risk areas, such as the cafeteria and extracurriculars. So it's not a blanket, no contact tracing. There is still contact tracing that can occur, but definitely not as widespread as.
It's only when they're unmasked.
Correct.
If they're masked, then we're good, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's all, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Novotny?
Thank you. We're working on our October child count, which will be coming due here next week sometime. That's our way that we obtain our state funds for our kids. And I'm looking forward to the walkthroughs with my special education teachers in all 8 schools. And last thing is Wednesday will be our first mental health and wellness meeting, and we're looking forward to having Mrs. Foley joining us 9 o'clock on Wednesday. Thank you.
Put that on your calendar.
I didn't know about this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I told you I don't get stuff.
What I came
Okay,
tonight.
Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Pardon me?
Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Yes, ma'am, and I will have someone send you that email tomorrow.
She's not getting some of her emails though.
Okay.
Sometimes people will email her and she's not getting it.
Okay.
So.
We'll make sure that you get that tomorrow, and I apologize.
That's okay. I'll see you on Wednesday. I think.
We're close on.
Check your calendar.
Mr. Price, I think you'll see that our staff is committed to working toward the goals of the strategic plan. I think that you're seeing that the high expectations are definitely in place, and I'm real proud of the work that
I
you're doing.
appreciate it, thank you. Absolutely. Board members, any other questions as it relates to what was shared with us? Any other
I'm good, thank you.
matters? Not hearing any other questions or comments then, with the next meeting being set for October 11th, 2021 at 6 o'clock, I would move for adjournment.
I'll second that.
Has been moved and properly second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
All right.
Any opposed?